guitars. Glenn's behind the camera. Anyway, we're going to show you how to do some high-end binding and purfling today. Here are two different binding machines. Both work on the same basic principle. And I want to show you how to actually mount your router to the machine. They have a plate. And as you can see, it's an aluminum plate. There is a hole here. Now, I'm going to come through the hole on the back of the plate. And you can see my threads are protruding from the back. I shall, okay, I want to get my hole lined up. And we're just going to basically screw the router onto the machine. Now it's a little tricky to get everything all lined up, and you'll probably actually learn a couple of new curse words while you're doing it. Now, I said that these two things are similar, and the machines are, in that we're going to hold the cutter perpendicular to the table. This one, Fleischmann, Williams, I'm not exactly sure who the guy that invented this one. This uses a parallelism fixture. I no longer use the spring. I found the spring to actually somewhat be a bother. But as you can see, even though it's swinging, this is still going to remain parallel. This will remain parallel because of this fixture just going up and down. But not all trim routers are the same anymore. This is a Porter Cable 7310. This will actually have about a 3 to 5 degree, I think it's a 3 degree angle of tilt right here at the base. You can actually see it right here how it is tilted out to pick this up. It almost looks like it's on crooked, but trust me, that is square. They did that so that the peripherals, like the guides and whatever can come on a laminate trimmer, will not fit Nikita, will not fit Delta, vice versa. So they basically bastardized their equipment. So when you get one of these machines, if you don't get it with the router mounted, it is something you need to consider. This guy here, in order to make this square, I need to put a shim back in the tower and lean the tower, or I could make a little wedge shim and put it behind the plate. For just the sake of expediency, I'm going to use the shim, and then when I clamp this down, that will hold things steady. So as you can see, it's not difficult, but you do have to take this into consideration. Now, if you do not know whether you're square or not, you can put in a 1/4 inch drill blank or a 1/4 inch drill bit into your chuck, put this in here, and then you can square it back to front, right to left. And I'm not worried too much on this way, but mostly this way. So once you verify that you're square, then you're going to be good to go. Now, what makes these things work is the donut. And you can see it on this one. There is a nylon circle. This is at an angle, and what it will do, it will locate on just a number of fixed points so that when we are cutting our grooves, we do not have a lot of inference outside of what we need to, so that we can get a good, clean cut. The top is not as bad as the back. The back will have a radius, but not only will it have the radius, it will be at a tilt. So that if you take this trim router and you don't have something like this, as you get near the upper bouts, that tilt will throw your cutter off square, and it will give the appearance that your binding pinches out. And that is why we use binding fixtures, because it is very difficult to do it any other way. So, with that underneath the belt, let me show you how to do a 45 style purfling. Well, actually this will be a 40 style purfling because we aren't coming down along the fingerboard. We're going to need, aside from the guitar body, which we have, we're going to use, in this case, we're going to use a black, white, black purfling. and you may not be able to see it, but we will take a still photo of it later. This is a standard Martin Purfling, thin layer of black, thin layer of white, thin layer of black, and that will give us a nice little line. Then we have what is also called a poly or a Teflon strip, and we're going to actually incorporate this into the binding, so you'll be able to see black, white, black. This will make the hole for the pearl, and then we're going to have the black, white, black, and then on the outside we'll have the binding. So right now what we're going to actually do, we're going to use these two machines so you get to see both of them in action, and we're going to cut purfling and we're going to cut the binding. Now a lot of times people will say, what do you want to cut first? Well, I do prefer to cut the widest cut, the purfling cuts, first, and there is a reason for that. The reason that I prefer to do the purfling cuts is, let's say this is our top. Now if you did the binding cut first and you're just nibbling this off, you're cutting this all the way through the top. And the sad part is, as you go around, you have weak areas in your top, especially here and here. So if you got a chance of tear out, cutting the binding, especially the side binding, is the time you're probably going to see it. So I prefer to do the wide cut first, which is this. So I'm going to cut the wide cut, and you're going to say, why? Well, first off, I'm not cutting through the top, so my chance of tear out is greatly reduced. Also, after I do that, and when I go to do the binding, if I do have a chance of tear out, since I've created this weak zone, that's probably, as far as the tear out would happen, it would be something that would be easily repaired, and it would be behind the purfling and binding, so nobody would ever see it. So you're going to see, we'll do the wide cut first, which would be the area for the black, white, black, the pearl, and the other black, white, black, and then the binding. Now I've already pre-measured. I know that I'm going to need a 1/4 inch cut. Now you're going to say, how do you do this? Well, in my condition, what I have here, I actually have ball bearings on the cutters. And let me show you a cutter. Okay. These are two Grizzly cutters. The ones that I have in here are actually Stuart McDonald, but they're all basically the same thing. You have a cutter and you have a ball bearing. Now the ball bearing is your pilot. Now in order to get your different binding sequences, it's just a matter of finding the proper bearing to run with a different cutter to get you what you need. Now when you mic the binding, which we're using a wood binding, which is 60 thousandths, we're going to be using a 65 thousandths pearl, and our black and white here I think are 35. Oh, they're 50. Okay, so I have 50, 50, and also on the poly, you may not be able to see that, but we're going to take a still photo. You have an area that has nothing, and on the bottom there's actually a little layer of masking tape. I'm going to lift this for you. There we go. And you can see there's a piece of tape there. That lets me know that that's the bottom. So we're actually going to have black, white, black, poly, black, white, black. And this can be very tricky to actually do when we get to do the actual binding. Now that layer right there, we're sitting at 165 thousandths. We're going to be putting on a binding, which we need to get right over here. This is going to be a wood binding, and the wood binding happens to be about 70 thousandths. So when we put this all together and get a full total count, I'm sitting at 245 thousandths. This cutter I know is already predetermined at 250 thousandths. So we're set up for the purfling cut. This is set up for the binding cut. So we're going to show you how to set the body up in the carriage in order to do our cutting. And what's going to be a lot of fun is when we actually go to do the binding ourselves, once we cut the grooves, you're going to see that it actually works pretty smooth. Now these are the two different kinds of pearls that I have. I use Powa. This is Ablam product. I think Chuck Erickson had something to do with the creation of this, and Larry Seifel. This will come in a sheet and we actually cut it. Now that's one type, and here is a second type, and I get my pearl, David Nichols at Custom Pearl Inlay. He's up in Malone, New York. Great guy to do business with. And we'll take some still videos of this so you can actually see the different pearls and what they look like. But they're pretty cool. And this product works very well. You'll see how it works in about halfway through the video. Now let's go get the body and put the body in. First thing I need to do now is I do need to set up the body into the carriage. Now since the top is most square to the sides, we always measure where the top is in relationship to the top. The object is to get the sides as perpendicular to the table as we can, but I have found that just by measuring the top, that's going to get us close enough so that we don't need to be too overthinking this. Now the carriage is not a vise. All that this is going to do, we have L brackets here, as you can see. They're adjustable in and out. Alright? And not only are they adjustable in and out, there is a little stop here that I can adjust vertically. So I can set this guitar body into this fixture and pretty much adjust it exactly where it needs to be. So if I measure this right here, I am at 6 3/4 inch. So I'm going to take this. I can push my L brackets together and I can tighten this. I actually have a little threaded insert so I can use that thumb screw so I can tighten this in. Now down here I'm about 6 7/8. 6 7/8 to 6 3/4. I'm not going to get too upset about it, but I still, since I can adjust it, will set it right up. So now we're about 15 16ths. I'm not going to worry. This is also 7 15 16ths. I'm going to adjust the thumb screw in underneath here. And these are kind of like working like a leg. We're kind of like putting books under a leg of a wobbly table. Now what we did here is I pretty much measured all the way around. We are between 6 and 15 16ths and 7 inches all the way around. And again, I'm going to let you know, I do get my pearl from David Nichols, Custom Pearl Inlay. He is in Malone, New York, 518-483-7685. But you can also find him at Custom Pearl Inlay, CustomPearlInlay.com. He's on the web. I have them linked at my website. Okay, so now you can see by having the L brackets adjusted, the stops there, there's not a lot of wobble in the unit. Before I turn this on and actually cut, I do want to make sure that we are where we want to be. Now, I know I told you I like to do the wide cuts, but Glenn brought this up to me for a demonstration purpose, and he had already cut the side binding, so we'll shoot him for that. So the side binding has already been cut. I'm still going to show you how to set things up, but for my case and preference is I like to do the side binding last. And the reason why I like to do that is I will do the back first. We put our back purfling in. We do our top purfling. Then I do the sides. Now I can do all 4 procedures with 3 setups. And by having the side setup for the side cutting done last, this will be the same as that. Whenever you do a side binding setup and change for the top or the back, you'll never get it precisely identical. And that is one of the areas that will always stand out with beginners, is that their binding will not look right because they've done the back, then they do the top. And most people will do that side binding and they'll adjust it for the back, then they adjust it for the top, and you don't get it the same. So we're going to hear a little bit of noise. Turn this on. Also at this time again, we're going to explain the climb cutting and the route cutting. When you have a cutter and the cutter is spinning in the rotation of cut, and in this case I'm grabbing this one, this is a bigger cutter, so you can see it would spin this way. Alright? A route cut would be, while that's spinning that way, you would pull it towards you. That is a route cut. What a climb cut would be is actually being fed in the direction of pull. Now, climb cutting can be dangerous. We're using so little bit of the cutter and removing such a small amount of the wood, a climb cut in this area is going to be relatively safe. The advantage of the climb cut is when you look at the angle of attack. Here is a top. And if I'm doing a route cut, I'm going this way, and you can see where the cutter, as it's spinning, is actually coming from inside to outside the guitar. My grain is running this way, I'm going to have a very high chance of it splitting. When I'm climb cutting, the cutter is coming from outside in. So my chance of tear out is greatly reduced. So I will climb cut. I think Stuart McDonald shows this little diagram of doing this, and then going all the way around. That will also work, but in essence they're doing the same thing. Climb cutting this area, which is the critical area, about an inch in from here to here. That's going to be your critical area. Once you get beyond here, it doesn't matter whether you route cut or climb cut, but right here, where that grain is very, very, let's say, fragile, that's where you got to be careful with the climb cut. Okay, now I have a piece here, a piece of dummy wood. I can make a test cut, and I'll be able to see how deep I am in relationship to my purfling and purl, and how wide I am. So I have this good old-fashioned board. Now you can probably see the cut. And the cut, here's an angle of it. We want 1/4 of an inch, that's about where we're at. The depth of this is showing to be 130 thousandths, which is probably more cut than I need. I only need it to be 65 thousandths. So we have it set double the depth. So how do I make this adjustment? On this cutter, on this particular piece, there is a thumb screw. And I have to relax this, and it's a micrometer type adjustment, and that thumb screw allows the base to go up or down. And in this case, I got to take the base, or I'm actually going to move this up. Clarity, I pulled the router off. This will fit behind the plate, and this will actually lock things up. So what I'm going to do is I will in essence loosen this knob. This will allow the plate to go up or down. So I will turn this and adjust this to the depth that I need. And I told you I need 65 thousandths. And that's all the cutter that I need exposed. And that's what I'm going to do. I will adjust that now so that we can set this up and cut that binding slot for the purfling. Okay. We made our adjustment. I just made a test cut. You can check your test depth a couple ways. One is to measure it. I actually like to lay my piece right in there. And I have it that it pretty much is maybe just a hair under my top. Because that top I know is heavy and we're going to have to take it down a little bit. But I have this set depth right now almost dead nuts to what this is. I'm also going to show you a little bit of a trick on when we get to the point of dropping in the pearl to get the pearl exactly where it needs to be. Okay, we just verified the setup. We took some still video or some still shots for you so you can actually see how this went together. We're going to be putting, this is the binding, it's a sycamore binding. We have the black, white, black, the poly strip, the black, white, black. That cutter is set to the width of cut, and I am going to now cut the binding channel. Now, if you look real close right here, you can see there's a risk of tear out right there. I actually lifted that up. These are the areas that are very, very delicate. So with climb cutting, I can go through this area with a minimal risk of tear out. So we're now going to make some dirt and some noise. And the next step you're going to see is us actually getting ready to put the binding and purfling together. So you should wear safety glasses. You should have hearing protection. Be careful where your dust chips are going. And at this point, this guitar, the difference between this setup is here the router would go around the guitar. Here we will work the guitar underneath the router. That's basically the difference between these two setups. So here we go, away we go. Now I took a couple of passes, I like to make sure everything's cleaned out real well. I think from what I can see, things look pretty good. I'm setting this back up so you'll be able to see, we're going to take a dry shot here, so you'll be able to see how the bearing rides and how this actually works. And with that, I would say, let's take a look at it. And next step, we're going to be putting the binding in. We actually did have to touch up this binding channel here. So I had done a setup just like we did for the other. Here in the binding, this is the binding setup. And if you can see it or not, here's my binding channel. That's for the binding itself. This is the purfling channel for the black, white, black, the pearl, and the black, white, black. And pardon my fat thumbs. Okay, put this back together. So you can see black, white, black, pearl, black, white, black. That fits into the purfling ledge right here very nicely. The binding will fit into the binding ledge very nicely. So here you can see we're all set up. We're ready to make the second cut. And then we will show you how to put the binding in, and we'll show you how to set the pearl. So now you're going to see this machine in action, which you've seen before. And now we get to make some more dirt. And again, safety glasses. You should have hearing protection. Don't hold my ears closed till we're done. And that's all there is to it. Now I'm going to come back with a sanding block. There's a little fuzzy here that I got to take off. I'm going to clean that up. Then we will set up the binding. Now this is a neck joint. It's already been, it's actually in here. It's actually a good idea to keep this closed till you're done finishing, or at least till you're ready to set the neck. Also, I like to block my sound hole so I don't get all the dirt in there, but this is Glenn's guitar. He wanted a free pearl job, so he gets the dirt and we aren't going to charge him for the dust. So the next video you're going to see me cleaning this up and getting ready to actually install the binding and the purfling. Right now we're going to get all this stuff out of the way, and I'll see you in a few minutes. Is right here. I'm going to need these saws, pencil, tape, Purfling strips. I'm going to need Teflon poly strips. These are the actual binding strips. Now, these are the first things I've got to work. Now, if we were doing a plastic binding, I would start at the neck and come around. I don't have that luxury. We're going with a wood binding, so I'm going to have to set my wood bindings up, and you can see I have my thumb at the waist. I can bring my binding here. I got a good mark. I can mark my center on here, and I'm going to cut this off. Now these two razor saws, this guy cuts on the pull stroke, and I like that. I have a sanding block, so I can set things up to square. I take my Purfling strips. I have two of them. Any kink, you want to get the kinks out. So you can just rub them between your fingers, get the kinks out of it, find the center, or approximate center, which is right here. And I'm just taping it on the top, just for that I know I got it handy. I'm going to rub the second one in, same as the last one, thumb at the waist. Come around, and this one I'm not going to be quite as perfect with, because I'm going to want to set this very cleanly against the other one. So I'm going to cut this just a little bit long, and I will do the actual joint when I am done. Okay, we are ready to start. Now this is when it gets a little bit fun. I'm going to lay everything out nice and neat. That is my Duco cement. I have my poly strips, and I have my tape. Now what I will do, since I'm right-handed, I'm just putting a couple pieces of tape here so that I can grab them in a hurry when I get started. I have some paper towels handy right underneath here. That's good, that's good, that's good. And I'm going to cut this off right about there. This will get actually finished trimmed when we open up the neck block. Now we actually get to spread some glue. Now I'm going to start from here to about here just to get things rolling. The instructions on the bottom of the on Duco cement, don't read them, don't waste your time. What you're going to do, literally, flood this up pretty decently with the Duco cement. I buy this usually at the dollar store. It's not expensive. Don't breathe real deep while you're working with this. Got a lot of people in trouble in the 60s. I had this lined up to my center. Remember I told you about this was the approximate center there. Make sure my tape is down. That's just my third hand. Get this strip in, tape side down. And here we go. There it goes, that slips, that slipped. All right, I got it started. And I haven't cussed yet. That's a good sign. Now what I'm going to do, I'll make sure that this is good. That is. Take the cotton. You can use a cotton rag or the paper towel, and you literally rub this in really nice and neat. And I know you can't see it, but when I put my tape down on the side, I'm not just squishing it, I'm giving it time to let the glue kind of like get out of the way. I'm also pushing down so I get a good seat into the binding channel. Now once you get it started, it's easy. Now we can just flood this up, and you notice I'm only going to about the apex of the waist. There is a method of madness for that. Again, this is kind of squishing in. I want to get good glue coverage on all of the pieces. And I know it looks messy, and it is, but that's the way you got to do it. Now the more I rub it, the more it seems to want to stick, and I can take a look at my edge down here against the body that I'm getting a good mate. That's important, that you get a good mating joint. And in case anybody's asking, I get these tape dispensers at Uline. They come in handy. Alright. Now the hard part, or I should say one of the hardest parts at this point, is going to be actually at the waist. Now as I'm pushing, I'm like pulling with this, pushing with my hands, but I'm always watching the side joint. It's going to happen, you're going to have some gapping, so know that that's going to happen. Don't panic when it does. We can fix that up in the finishing stages. Again, now I'm coming to the waist. And if you can see all the glue I got going everywhere, I really don't care about being neat. I want glue. This is a case where too much, there is no such thing. Again, I'm using my thumb and my forefinger, kind of like a whip fence guide. And the more I rub it, the better I get it to seat the happier I am. Now this little cradle that I have that I use for the binding machine is like a third hand in this process. You only have to do a couple hundred of these to learn how to do them. But you can see it's really not that difficult. It's just a process. And again, in a way I'm thinking down and in. Now this green tape has more stretch than the white. And that's one reason why I like to use it. And you can't use enough tape. Alright. The waist is the critical area here. Alright, here's my nippers. Since that's the neck joint, I don't need to worry a heck of a lot about that. Now all I'm going to do is follow back with the tape. Again, thinking down, thinking in. What I'm doing here is I want to make sure that that waist is tight. If you're going to have an opening, this is where you're probably going to have it. Now what I will actually probably do is put a clamp on here when we get the other side done. So that all looks good. I got glue coming out the bottom. You can actually see the acetone is working with the resins in the rosewood and bleeding a little bit. That's not me. Alright, that's done. Now I can cut this off up to where I need to be. Take this binding. Alright, I have about 3/8 of an inch. I'm using my thumbnail as a close get me there. Wood has run out. And run out basically is talking about the relationship of the grain as it comes out of the wood. So when you go to lift this off, watch the fibers of the wood. If the fibers are laying up this way, you don't want to grab the tape and pull it back because that will lift the fibers. You'd want to go so it's much like petting a cat or a dog. You go with the fur. So if the fibers are laying this way, you want to take the tape off that way. So you grab one, pull it across, try to find which way the fiber is reading, and just follow the fiber. Just like petting a cat, petting a dog, you want to go with the grain. If you go against it, you'll start lifting and that can be somewhat of a mess. Now you're going to see how to actually set the pearl now. We have another body ready to go, and I'm going to show you how we drop in the pearl. The trick of actually laying in the pearl is not that complicated. You can use anything at this point. All I want to do is actually lift the poly out of the groove. This would be a good start. The poly separates the purfling to allow the pearl to sit in. Now also, I can now check to see how deep I am, and if I would have to shim my pearl up or down, no, I should say if I have to shim the pearl up, you can take cotton thread and work it to the bottom of the groove. In this case, we're actually in pretty good shape. Now I don't pull all the poly out. I'm only going to take out a certain amount. Come on up. Go back. And I want to grab the tape. There we go. Now, the way I want to do this, I do not drop pearl all the way in, all the way around. I do probably about a 6-inch section at a time. You can see I just put in a little bit of glue, rub my finger in it. I use a little, this is an old saddle blank, and I'll actually use that to push it right into the groove. There you go. You're going to hear snapping and cracking. And what I want to do, if you hear it, I am gently pushing the pearl into the area that I've just worked. I'm not pushing hard. It's gentle. And I just don't go wipe. I wipe across. I have a little bottle of water handy. And I actually want my pearl to be just a little bit below the top. Because we know we're going to take the top down a little bit. The more cracks you get, the better off. And again, I'm only working 6-8 inches at a time. It doesn't take a lot of glue. All I'm doing is smearing it around. And again, I'm lightly pushing in to the work. Also, I want to mention, this is Ablam pearl, kind of like a plywood of pearl. It's wonderful stuff. It's forgiving, easy to work. It's a wonderful material to work with, as it is not, it doesn't waste the resource. Unlike solid pearl, this uses lower grade pearl underneath it with the high grade pearl on the top. This is just a spectacular material. I just love the way this looks. And what I'm doing is I'm looking at my cracks. Sometimes you have to get in here and just push things back to close the joints up. Just take a nail, sharpen it to a point, and this is the process. Glue, crack, break. Glue, crack, break. for those of you who like to imbibe, you can have a little bit of beer in between the glue and the crack. But you can hear constantly looking for openings in the joints, and it's just looking spectacular. So happy with the way this is turning out. This is for a man by the name of Harold Gillum. He is in San Diego, and I want to say thank you, Harold. And you can just hear it snipping and snapping. That's perfect. And I am not pushing very, very hard. I'm not being a wimp about it, but I'm not pushing terribly hard. And you notice how I'm wiping at an angle. Up here I can start going with it because the glue has set, but I'm constantly looking for openings. And boy, I'll tell you what, you didn't know how sticky your fingers could get, but they can get awfully darn sticky. If you don't have a saddle blank, almost anything will work. And again, I get this material. Dave Nichols, Custom Pearl, cuts it for me. 518-483-7685. Dave and Nadine would be more than happy to help you out. I also use Andy DePaul's material. I'm not sure of his phone number. Andy DePaul, you'll find him easy enough on the web. I think it's Luthier's Supplies. And he has hand-cut pearl. Now this stuff will come, it has a good and a bad side to it. You'll see it very easily because the bad side's almost black. The top side has the pretty pearl. So you know if you're seeing black, that's not what you want. That's the first piece of poly that we had in there. And you can see it does go pretty quickly. It's not very... The hardest part is getting the binding in. And once you get against there, I'm just gently pushing. I'm trying to guess at the angle I'm at here. It's maybe 10-15 degrees. And I'm letting it find its own line. Everything's looking just fine. Now I'm going to lift this up. So if you aren't afraid to get messy, this is a great job. You can see how easy this is. I'm just using water on a paper towel. But the colors that come out of this stuff is just, oh, it's just breathtaking. I don't use super glue on this, if I can help it. Super glue near the top is not a good thing. Super glue can make spruce yellow, and you don't want that to happen. And it can happen after, long after it's put in. It doesn't necessarily happen overnight. Now I would say to let this sit overnight, and in the morning you can come back and you can sand that down flush to the top, and that is how you do a pearl binding on a guitar. It's a simple process, and it's not hard, and it is well worth the time. It can sure make something pretty. Pearl, you will find, depending upon what you get, where you get, can be anywhere from roughly about $1 to maybe $2 an inch, depending upon the quality and grade. But it sure does make for a pretty instrument. Again, thanks again from my shop to yours, John Hall. Bluescreek Guitars, check out our website. Hopefully you'll find something that you can use. Bye-bye.